Thank you for joining us for the next hour or two in this episode of Insight Myanmar podcast. In an age of nearly limitless content, we appreciate that you're choosing to take valuable time out of your day to learn more about what is happening in Myanmar. It's vital for this story to continue to be heard by people around the world, and that starts right now with you.
Thanks for having me. I'm Mia Kruska. I work for a green political party here in Berlin, Germany, in the Asian division. And yeah, my background with Myanmar is that dealing with Myanmar since 10 years now. So after I graduate, I traveled the first time to Myanmar, just like a backpacking person. And I was super fascinated by what was happening politically there. Like it was in 2014. And I was very young, 19 or 20, like very more naive, I would say. But it really kept me, and it especially kept me that when I was back, it was super hard to find any information. And even people here in Germany didn't know that there actually is a country existing called Myanmar. So I was like, okay, how can that be? So I started studying more and more. And so, Myanmar was also a topic for my bachelor's, also for my master's. So I studied Southeast Asian studies. And Myanmar is still a thing till now.
Right. And thank you for that introduction. And I want to share with our audience, this is part of our ongoing emergency crisis response to the earthquake and the aftermath. And our interviews are exploring many different directions of the guests that are coming on. As we talk with Mia, obviously she is not in Myanmar now and also is not part of the urgent relief efforts. But I think this is a valuable conversation because as we're trying to hit the many different aspects, perspectives, angles of what's happening, of course, a large component is what's happening on the ground and the international response dimension and as the situation progresses, what people are going through. But another part to explore is I think that many of our listeners fall into a basket of having some special connection with Myanmar, whether it's spiritual or an extended period of time there or friends or something else, and just feeling this pained connection of what people are going through now and memories of the Myanmar experience and their connection are coming to mind. And that's something that I think many people are going through now. And so I think through this conversation with you and exploring your past experiences and relation to the country and the people and what you're feeling right now, I think this is kind of a stand-in for what many listeners are feeling in their own homes, kind of scattered throughout the world.
Yeah, so I remember waking up in Germany on a Friday morning, like the earthquake already happened, but I didn't know. And every Friday morning I have Thai classes online with the Thai school in Bangkok. And so they were writing me, actually we can't do our class because of the earthquake. And then I was like, oh, what? And then I checked it, and then I found out that actually the epicenter is Myanmar. But I couldn't find so many news. Like I just got the news from Bangkok, but knowing Myanmar and also knowing how the architecture is, or that it's not, the architecture is very old and maybe not stable. And I just knew, okay, for Myanmar, it's a different thing. And also knowing the epicenter was there. So first thing was like checking my friends, like in Myanmar, but also my friends who are living along the Myanmar-Thai border, and yeah, checking if they are okay, asking also my friends or Burmese friends living here in Germany how their families are. Yeah, this was the first thing I did. And then throughout the weekend, I saw so many devastating pictures, and it was super hard to cope with. Like, I got very, very emotional. And I think, especially throughout the last 4 years, where we have so many devastating news on Myanmar, and that it's very challenging to have hope, to see a perspective. I think I still have hope. Like now, after a week of digesting what's happening with the earthquake, I still have hope, but throughout the last week, it was very, very hard. And then I realized also I wanted like to see all the pictures from Myanmar throughout the week. I was about also to reshare it on Instagram or other social media. But then I was like, no, I think I don't want to share. I think it's very important to share what is happening there and also to share these pictures. But sometimes it feels, yeah, you have an agency in these helpless moments, like just sharing devastating pictures, but for what? So I wanted to pause, thinking about like, what can I share? What has maybe a bit more meaning or something more speaking out from my heart? What brings something different maybe on social media? So I posted like, or I was thinking on Myanmar and what all the travel I did, or also like the time I lived there gave me. What did I learn from Burmese people? What helps me now? And what also could encourage people to help Myanmar in this situation? And I was thinking back on my first time being in Myanmar. I think it was the second week. Yeah, I was very young, and I traveled with a group of monks and nuns through different parts of the country. I mean, back then I haven't had a mobile. I didn't really know where we were, but it was super interesting. Such a valuable experience being so close to them for such a long time and really seeing Buddhist, how can I say, behavior or concept in daily life. And so seeing like every morning the nuns and monks walking arms. And I saw that, the people who give like little amounts of money or food to the monks were very thankful, really thankful for giving, and very, I don't know, felt really, very thankful. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but in a very deep sense. And from like my Western perspective back in the days, I was a bit like irritated. I was like, hey, but shouldn't be the monk and nuns being very thankful for receiving? Like, and I don't know, seeing this every day, every morning, I was really wondering. And so I talked, like, I remember when I went to bed, or like when I was sharing the mosquito net with some nuns, I was asking them about it. And they said, yeah, no, actually, like it's here in Myanmar, you have to be thankful for giving because it's like a chance to improve your karma. And actually, it was really, I don't know. I mean, it's a concept which is really contradictory to capitalism thinking or capitalist thinking. So, yeah, I wrote about this experience and how important it is to give when we can. And this is a moment where Myanmar needs us, especially people who are now affected by the earthquake. So yeah, I post about that. I also posted some sources where people can donate, or trustworthy donation, because like a lot of donation goes also to the military, or the more official donation goes to the military, what we really don't want. So I think it's especially important to explain people who don't have so much knowledge about Myanmar how important it is to donate to grassroots organizations. So yeah.
So what I hear you saying is that a lot of this last week has been a combination of figuring out how to be an ally, what kind of ally is needed for this time, and where you fit in while you're balancing your own emotions. And then as you're trying to situate yourself and understand your position as an ally and what you can do best, while also trying to maintain that emotional and mental balance,
Mm.
drawing on lessons from Myanmar itself at this time. And I think, again, I think this is a really valuable reflection and conversation at this time for so many like you that are in this position, that are trying to figure out from my stance, from my place, how can I be an ally, and what are the lessons I can actually take from Myanmar to understand what my role best is at this time. So I wonder if you can expand on that a bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I also was thinking, especially after the military coup, like Myanmar, when it's in the news, Myanmar is seen like as a country which needs help. And sure, it
Yeah.
does. Sure, it does. But it's, I mean, you kind of oversee all the aspects what Myanmar and Myanmar people have already, like, or what they can give, and what did I learn? Like that it's not just one, like I just thought about, okay, I just don't like the thinking like the West is always a country who gives like that. And then it's just like maybe from the financially side or money side, but I deeply believe, or this is also something I really experience and value, that I received so many things from people in Myanmar, and I wanted to show that, and I wanted to, to live that and to value that. So I think this is also something, I mean, my definition of an ally is like it's both sided, and not
Mm.
just seeing Myanmar as a developing country, like at its very superficial perspective on a country, and I think also a very westernized country, like perspective.
I think that's very true, and I think that's something that our platform has tried to hit time and again, is how much Myanmar is a giver. And of course, when it comes to spiritual wisdom and the practice of meditation and Buddhism, it's a giver in every sense of the word. I think that that's without doubt. For those that are outside of the meditation or spiritual realm, I think that when one of the profound things is when you look at how the Burmese for these years and decades have had to self-organize and seek out creative resistance and find ways to serve each other, whether it's through infrastructure or education or health or whatever other kinds of community-based ways, when the state is not only not helping them and not only actively preventing them, but also threatening their very lives and trying to help each other. When you look at that, they are light years ahead of us, just light years ahead of anywhere I know in the world. If any, most places I know in the world, including my own country, if we were to go through even a slight version of the kind of hardships that they face, we would have so much to learn from how they've handled that. And we've seen that in the United States, even under the Trump administration.
Mm.
I've had conversations with American friends who have felt a sense of hopelessness and a lack of ideas. And I've pointed them to podcast conversations that we've done on Myanmar. And I've said, these are much more extreme conditions of oppression. And these are the kinds of creative resistance where you have asymmetrical power structures that you can't face it head on. There are many different ways that you can battle this besides just feeling depressed or defeated because the head-on style didn't work, but because we haven't had that experience, we haven't developed those faculties. And so I think whatever way one looks, there is just so much that we could be learning from, and certainly a lot that we could be giving as well. But as you say, this is a reciprocal relationship.
Yes, yes, definitely. And I also remember, like, I mean, I don't know if you followed, but like also the political situation in Germany is like very fragile. I mean, not just, or not fragile, maybe like many German people feel a bit insecure, like what's happening, like not just with the Trump administration, also before the elections. And I mean, to compare to other countries, I think we are still fine, but you feel a lot of insecurity. And also I feel a lot of insecurity, especially some weeks ago, like before the election, and where we were expecting the right wing gets more vote, what they unfortunately did. And I remember like a Burmese friend of mine, she invited for some Burmese food. So I went there, and like also some other Burmese people living here in exile joined, and they were asking me about the political situation here in Germany, and they felt that I, yeah, felt very insecure or that I didn't feel well. And then they said, like, no, actually, we are here for that. We have so many resources. We have been to so much stuff. Like, we know how you feel, and we are here for you. And that meant a lot to me. And also realizing, I thought, like, wow, I was so naive. This was a moment. I mean, I knew before through what they are going or what they have been going through and still go, but this was the first time I felt like I'm understanding this on a more
Yeah.
emotional level, and that they are offering me their resources, kind of, or mental resources, how they are going through hard stuff. And I felt so thankful, and on the other hand also super naive. But yeah, there I felt like, well, it's, yeah, I was very thankful for receiving in that way. But also,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is what you see in Milk Tea Alliance. When I first came to understand Milk Tea Alliance, I thought naively that after the military coup, since Myanmar was in such a difficult situation, that this was a kind of bond that was bringing the region to help Myanmar. And however true that is, it's equally true how Myanmar is helping the region. And
Mm.
that happens in several ways. I mean, in the Milk Tea Alliance groups that I'm in, you'll hear about an arrest or an authoritarian measure taken anywhere from Indonesia to Thailand to anywhere else, or something celebrated, that
Mm.
some positive sign that takes place as well in the region. And the Myanmar activists are lighting up, and are lighting up with a celebratory message, or with a concern and wanting to share advocacy, even in the situation they're in. But more so, and I've stressed this many times on the podcast, when I speak to activists from Milk Tea Alliance from countries outside of Myanmar in the region, they all hold Myanmar as kind of the pinnacle, kind of like
Mm.
the admiration that they have for how the Myanmar activists have been able to hold the candle in the most difficult of times, in situations that they've never faced in their countries. They're really showing what's possible. And so I think this is something we're trying to do on the platform with the conversations we're having, is to flip this narrative. There's this flawed narrative out there of that looks at, and I'm sure that you know this not just from your personal reflections, but also your academic and professional involvements, and in how you're engaged in the country. But there's this reductionist kind of view of Myanmar that puts things in black and white terms, and then if that wasn't enough, it goes on from there to look at just the breakdown and the difficulty and the damage and everything else, and it doesn't
Mm.
take in that nuance. And that nuance is what informs a different narrative from taking place, which changes the entire way one looks at it. And that's to me, that's the real tragedy of that understanding not being better fostered.
Yeah, definitely. There's also another narrative I'm often confronted with, like here in the German European sphere when it comes to advocacy on Myanmar, that people sometimes think like, Myanmar is too complicated. Like this is always like, sometimes it's so hard to advocate on Myanmar, just drawing out like, hey, it's important. Like I have always to find good arguments, like why is it important? But also like, when I explain, then it's like, oh yeah, Myanmar is too complicated. And sure, it is complicated. Like thinking on all these different ethnic armed organizations. And I mean, there is definitely no black and white. There are different, I don't know, different grays, I would say, or like, but I just don't want to stop with Myanmar being too complicated, because then it doesn't have any productivity. Like, if you stop there, it's, wait, I have to think. Then people here who might want to do something for Myanmar stop. But I think looking in like more small, like looking into smaller organizations, like different regions, like on a smaller scale, then you see so many different little improvements in infrastructure, or like how passionate people in Myanmar are to build something different. Like, as you said, it's not black and white, and not everything is complicated. Like, sure, it is challenging, but in this complexity, you find a lot of hope, especially like seeing how many democratic forces are standing for a better change, and especially see it in a younger generation who are also reflecting on like how they are influenced by different ethnic national thinking, for example. Like there is a reflection and there is a motivation to do things differently. And but it also needs education, and this is, I think, another big topic in Myanmar, education, and especially in this crisis, how the younger generation can seek for better education. But I have hope, and somehow that in a maybe more far than near future there will be a positive change, at least on a more local base. I don't really see it on a national level, but I mean, also looking back in Myanmar's history, I think it never have been like a nation state, or like not everyone identified it with. And so I think this is also not a solution for the future.
So in your last response, I noticed a kind of moving back and forth between the personal and the professional academic. And that's a balance, I think, that is interesting to look at here, because we began this conversation by talking about your profound personal experience of being a 19-year-old backpacker that somehow got incorporated in a caravan of monks and nuns traveling who knows where, somewhere in the country, and the experience you gained from that. And then you went on to talk about your undergraduate thesis, your master's thesis, your current work, which I haven't really touched on in detail yet, and I don't know how much you could share of that. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about your professional and academic background into Burma, Myanmar, to whatever degree you're comfortable in being able to share publicly, and then talk about how that background has been incorporated into the personal interactions that you had from the start, and that I'm sure continue to this day.
So what I said already, like after traveling the first time in Myanmar, I mean, I think it was a typical thing, like with a backpack, doing the typical route, like Yangon, Mandalay, Bagan, Inner Lake, and like all this typical route in the white area, like where it was not dangerous to travel. And then it really kept me, because I wanted to get to know more about the country. So actually, I started in Germany studying history and German language, which was not really related to Myanmar, but I tried to squeeze in as much Myanmar as I can. So I did my bachelor thesis on the Shan state, or the history of the Shan state, interviewing like Austrian Shan princess. Inge Sargent was a Austrian woman, and she, after the Second World War, she studied in US, got to know Sao Seng. They fall in love, they got married in US, and he was from Burma. This is the only thing she knew. So she went back with him to Shan State, or back in the days, it was Shan States. So around, I can't remember the exact number, but maybe 33 or 39 different Shan states, which are reigned under the Saupas, like the kings, or like different Shan kings. And then when they arrived in Burma, back in the days, Burma, she realized that he is one of these kings, and that she is like the new Shan princess, which I think, especially back in the time, was very challenging, because I mean, she learned the language Shan, she learned also Burmese, and actually, like, both of them, they tried to shift from feudalism to more democratic structures in their little state, like Sepaw. And yeah, I was covering this kind of history time frame. But yeah, just to wrap it up here, like, after the military coup happened, then her husband got killed. She had to flee with her two daughters. And yeah, then, I don't know, she was never able to come back to Myanmar, but she wrote a book about it, and I read it when I was the second time in Myanmar. And actually, like, the book called Twilight Over Burma, and I was like, wow, this really sounds very too romantic, and too, like, I was actually not really keen reading it, but back in that time, I haven't had another book to read, but her story really kept me. So yeah, we stayed, like, I wrote her, we stayed in contact, and then, like, I wrote my bachelor thesis about it. And that back in the days, I got so into Shan State. Also, I get to know some Burmese or Shan, now friends living also in US. And when I stayed with them, they had a call with family members in Shan State, and they told them that someone from their family got caught by the military for forced service. Oh, and I was really shocked, because it was super hard for me to research that. I wanted to write about it, but like, it was super hard to gain any knowledge. And yeah, then I started researching again and again and again. And then I also lived for a couple of months in Myanmar, went back to Seaport, talked to many people. And then, I don't know, I think also the civil war in this area got also more intense. And being a bit more aware, like, you could see it everywhere. But I think as a normal tourist, it was a bit harder to see, even if you were there. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and then for my master thesis, I focused on this was already after the recent military coup, so I couldn't go back to Myanmar. So I decided to do my research along the Thai-Myanmar border, and I worked together with the Shan Women's Action Network in Chiang Mai. They really, really helped me. And yeah, my research was focusing on the issue of political representation in Shan State. I mean, even, yeah, I think you really see it's an issue in general in Myanmar, political representation of different ethnic groups. But you can see it also, like, in Shan State itself, for example, because Shan State is very diverse. Like it seems like from the outside, when you hear Shan State, that they are just living the Shan, but it's not true. And even the Shan itself, they are so diverse. And yeah, how do you present that on a political level? Um, yeah, so I did many different interviews, like, and someone also said, like, yeah, actually, like, when we think on a future Myanmar, we should find different names for the states, because, like, just as Shan are represent in the Shan state, and I mean, even there, like, many Shan don't really call themselves Shan, they call themselves Dayai, like the Great Thai, but I would love to use that name, actually, but then people don't really know from what I'm talking about. So I stay with Shan. And yeah, so there you maybe see the complexity, right? Or the what people see as like, oh, that's so complicated to form a future Myanmar, or like, yeah, how do you want to form like a government with these different ethnic diversities? And but I think I don't know. Thinking on a more local level, I think it's possible. I think many are trying already, and I don't know. Just keep on going and not stopping, like saying like, "Oh, it's too complicated." I think even looking at the diversity in Myanmar, I think there's also a big learning also for here for Europeans or Westerners. Like I think it's like a globally like global question thinking about political representation and diversity. Like there's like it's a big topic not only in Myanmar. And just saying like it's too complicated, we have the same issues here, like on a different level maybe. But it's yeah, I don't know. I really think sometimes also looking back, like or looking into history, like Myanmar has been always seen as very separately. I really don't know why. This is still a conundrum to me. I'm also collecting like travel history books from different travels all over history, and even people who were traveling a lot in Asia, they always skip Myanmar. But even before the military coup. And I don't know why. I really don't know why. And I think this is also, I see till now, that Myanmar is always seen as very separate country and not putting it in a more global context. But yeah, I mean, then you can draw the lines also, yeah, topics to diversity or other topics. And yeah, this
Yeah,
is like a thought I had, I wanted to add.
no, there's a lot there. I think that's true, and I think historically, when you look at, the British colonial period or the Burma Front and World War II, it always seemed to be, uh, there always seemed to be a reason that people went to Myanmar. They went here because they wanted to go somewhere else, or they went there because they wanted to protect this, or there's an interest there because of what's around it or what's inside it. But it has seemed to be bypassed historically for so long and misunderstood. And I think the other thing there that you're getting at that I've noticed as well is that I think every issue that we're finding in Myanmar today, they aren't Myanmar issues. They are issues that permeate and are found throughout many other places in the world. They're perhaps more extreme in Myanmar. They're perhaps more urgent to look at in Myanmar. But I think when we talk about shaping narratives and cultivating narratives to be able to have a greater impact than what they're having now, and some of the flawed ways that these narratives are constructed, I think one of the things I've worked on is by finding some of those threads of the Myanmar narrative and showing the shared humanity and common humanity of those, of what you find elsewhere. And you've touched upon several of them here. I mean, you've talked about the far right party in Germany. I've talked about the some of the more extreme measures we're seeing in the U.S. under the Trump administration.
Mm.
But then, as you look at creative resistance or ethnic identity or what it means to live among diverse populations and have representation in a kind of federal system. We could just go on and on and on. There's
Yeah.
so many issues that are prevalent in Myanmar. And yes, they're complicated, but they're not complicated because they're a Myanmar issue. They're
Yeah.
complicated because what is taking place. And what happens to be Myanmar is a human issue of
Yeah.
different things coming together and not having an easy solution. And it does take
Yeah.
time and focus and care to be able to look at what those are and how to best resolve and move on from these enormous complexities.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I'd like to prompt you now, as far as you're comfortable sharing, to discuss beyond your academic career, professionally, what you're involved in now with Myanmar.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, I can share just some things because yeah, Myanmar is a very sensitive topic, even here in Germany. So I can't share a lot of things, even if I would love to. But I mean, first at all, I'm super happy to still being able to work on Myanmar here in Berlin because there are not many jobs. Like, I mean, I'm not just focusing on Myanmar, I'm focusing on Southeast Asia. But yeah, I'm really happy that I can still do this professionally. And yeah, maybe I can share a bit more what I see here about like, yeah, being an exile as a Burmese person in Germany, which is, I think, very challenging as well. I mean, I think you see the same things or similar things also in Thailand for Burmese people. But here in Germany, it's a case that, yeah, you have the issue with like the passport extensions, which I think is a huge problem all over the world with Myanmar people, like that you can't go to the embassy here. Like, yeah, it's dangerous for the family in back in Myanmar, so people don't do it. Then also, yeah, the case that they came maybe through like a scholarship to Germany, but scholarships are not like they are limited. And now after the 4 years after the coup, like you see many scholarships are ending. And so the question is like, what next? Because many of them were political activists and they are scared to go back to Myanmar or they don't really know where to go. And so, yeah, it was like people are thinking about seeking asylum, but this also gets very complicated or more and more complicated in Germany because of the strengthening right wing. Like, I mean, also like the main topic here in Germany before the election was migration. And it was really a mess. And yeah, these are like things people have to face. And yeah, also I don't really look positively in the future. I think it will get harder. And additionally, like I think many people feel, yeah, lonely here in Germany because especially people here in Germany, they don't really know where Myanmar is or what's happening there. And if they know, they just see the crisis, but there's really little understanding. So it's also very, yeah, yeah, lacking of solidarity or empathy, right? So yeah, and Germany doesn't have like huge Burmese communities like in US or Australia. I mean, there are some more smaller communities, especially in Frankfurt, but I mean, they are not big. So it's also very hard for them like to have a voice here, to find a voice. And yeah, that's very, very challenging. Like I'm not really working like directly on that, but like this is like just from what I get working in the field, I would say. Yeah. And also I'm just very worried about them and how they feel, especially after the earthquake and not being able to go back to their families and help. I mean, what I find always very impressive, like how fast they can set up funding and donation events. Really, like I mean, I think it's also like you see it also in many other countries, but I don't know. I'm always very impressed, and yeah. So I think this is like a way how they cope, how they still keep an agency and also to help their country.
Right. And how have you found your personal side and your personal relationship with Myanmar and your academic professional relationship with Myanmar? How have you find them coming together and informing one another?
I think it's just based on curiosity. I just wanted to know more, like, and I just didn't want to do it just privately. Like, I mean, actually, it's many people told me, like, are you crazy? Like, why are you focusing so much on Myanmar? No one is interested in Myanmar. Like, you won't find a job. And there was a time I was really struggling, like, especially in my master thesis, which is kind of more important also professionally, like, where do you want to go next? And finding a job. um, I was really doubting. And but there was just no other topic I was so curious about and wanted to dig deeper. And it's just, I don't know where it comes from, no clue, but I also feel it on an emotional side. Like it really comes from very deep inside that I don't see myself doing something else, or at least not for longer. And yeah, also what drives me still is that there's so much to learn. Like, as more as I learn, I realize how less I know and how much more I can learn. And actually, that's perfect for a curious person. I would die if there's nothing more to learn. And yeah, so I think I'm really driven by that. And maybe especially because it's so complex and I want to get an idea. Like, I think, yeah, for example, looking into Shan State now, I mean, this is like very complex when it comes to different ethnic arms organization and how they are fighting against each other or working with each other, and also looking then into the history, how they formed and then how they surrender and then how they formed again, like in a different, like it's really complex but super interesting. And yeah, just can't stop doing that.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And zooming out a bit on the question, looking at the Burma studies field among researchers, academics, analysts, et cetera, and especially those who are not Burmese,
Mm,
those that are outside the country
mm,
that are largely coming from Western contexts that are engaged in studies. This has always been a question, and this is a question that goes beyond Myanmar. This is a question of to put it just in more general terms, which probably can be broken down, but of white academics and researchers studying non-white places. This is an overall
mm-hmm,
topic of conversation, and it's a
mm-hmm,
topic in Burma studies, and it's more of a topic since the coup and since the
mm-hmm,
time of conflict and the difficulty, on one hand, the difficulty of being able to do research and go on the ground,
mm-hmm,
and on the other of just the ethics and the responsibility that one has in that position with knowing the place of privilege that one has in the outsider status. And so I wonder if you can speak on how you have come to understand those ethics, how the
mm,
sensitivity you try to navigate, and maybe the
mm,
concerns that you see at this time in that field in general.
mm. Yeah, so actually, what I didn't mention, like, I'm also a member of the Myanmar Institute. And 1 year ago, I was also like the first chair in the board. So the Myanmar Institute is like a mostly German, or like an academic organization with mostly German researchers or journalists. And yeah, I mean, I was in the board when the coup happened. And there you really, like, I noticed there are two sides. And maybe it's also a generational thing. Like, I realized the more younger generation, they're reflecting about their standpoint or about, like, about their privilege and what it means to do research on Myanmar and what ethics you have to follow. And it's not really easy. It's not an easy task. I think there's no right solution fits all, but you have to be very sensible. I always mix them up. Maybe both. You have to be both, kind of. Actually, also I would consider myself being more at that place, and also doing my research along the Myanmar-Thai border. In practice, doing interviews, it was not always easy, but I can get back to that later. I just wanted to the other side, which I see are more the older researchers. They are not reflecting so much. They claim to have a neutral position. And I think, to be honest, for me, there is no neutral position. It's not there. Me as a researcher, I'm interpreting what I get out of the sources, if it's interviews or paper from back in the days or historical paper, I'm interpreting it. So I have also to kind of reflect on who is interpreting it. And it's always from a Western perspective, and I can't get away by that. And depending on what you look at it, it's a good perspective, or maybe it's good to have an outsider perspective for some things that makes it more complicated. So I think it's always important to try to work in a tandem, and not to recheck your analysis with someone from there, or from Myanmar, or who is more see it from a different triangle. You can't always get every perspective, but at least you can try. And so that's why also I work together with the Shan Women's Action Network, because I think, they explained me things, they point out things I never would have seen without them. And when it comes also security is also a big thing. How do you protect your sources? And you have to make sure they know, when they do an interview, that there is a security issue, because not everyone knows. And it's also very complex, but I think it's the right thing to do. And I think we also have to embrace mistakes, because as I said, there's not one solution fits all. And just to give an example, I think I was also a bit naive. I remember when I arrived at the Myanmar-Thai border and I wanted to do some interviews, but I just arrived. It was after COVID, or still COVID ongoing. So people were also not super open and keen to interact. I tried to find some people in the Shan community to to talk with. But many were very suspicious, because I said, actually here are coming so many researchers. They wanted to talk to us. And then they are using our traumas to climb their career ladder up. They get a degree. We don't get a degree. We are just being here with our traumas and telling our traumas. It's a lot of effort. It's hard to face these experience. And why should we tell you? And I was yeah, true. And then they asked me what do we get out from it? And then I was and I haven't had a solution right away, or an offer, but actually it was such a good experience, very uncomfortable. I was also very hit, not that they rejected me. It was more that it was a moment I was okay, I didn't reflect enough. They are so right. So actually, we found an agreement. I helped them with going to the border, delivering some goods for the people in need, or financing some stuff as much as I could. I was also a student. I haven't had a lot of money. Sure, I had the privilege to travel there, but I think it's a lot about trust building. But meaningful trust building, like not just pretending you build trust. And yeah, this is something I always try, like really say, like showing people I have good intentions. I do mistakes. There are still some blind spots, but please show me. Just tell me. And I mean, I think it's also sometimes a bit hard. Maybe it's something cultural, but I mean, as a German person, like we have been known as being very honest and direct, maybe sometimes too direct, but I try. And yeah, from what I experienced in Myanmar, that it's sometimes a bit hard to talk directly, like, or to criticize, but I really urged everyone, and still in my work, please tell me if you felt uncomfortable somewhere or if you disagree. Like, I'm open, I'm here to learn. And I think, yeah, this is maybe also something, I mean, in general, and in these days where everything is so insecure and shifting, that it's so important to listen to each other, like with an open mind and open heart, like really what does the other one experiencing, or how and why, and like no matter if I disagree or not, like I think we can always put this aside for the first step, like just listening and understanding, really understanding the other viewpoint. And then we can still disagree, but but maybe we see another perspective. And I think reality is like a many different fragments of different realities. So yeah, I think many people lost that a bit along the way. And I think especially interculturally, it can be challenging. But yeah, I don't know. I just love it to see different perspectives because I learned something. I really, and I don't want to stop with these attempts. Like even if I'm getting old, I think because sometimes old people, sometimes they think they know how the world works. And I mean, I haven't been old yet, but maybe this is changing, but it's really something I want to keep, like being open. And I think also while listening, understanding, it's also a good baseline for building something better. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. And I certainly think that communication is it can be a miracle. You know, I wouldn't be running this platform if I didn't believe in the miracle that communication represents. I often go back to, in my training, to the words of Caleb Gattegno, speaking is easy, communication is a miracle. And this is the kind of expression that I think when I first hear, I think, oh, that's kind of a clever, nice way to say it. And then as I went through my training, the underlying wisdom of that statement just came out more and more, the true miraculous nature of communication and how it's almost this mystical thing that's beyond our control to fabricate, and yet we can set up the conditions where it can manifest, and we can it's almost like this spiritual entity we can just embrace and nurture, but not really control or create. And I also appreciate your description of this distinction and difference between the elder and the younger generation of Western, or in this case, German Burma scholars and academics and analysts, and the nature of that divide. And I really appreciate that story you shared. I mean, it's a very vulnerable, even awkward story of the of those that are in harm's way and that are expressing concern that their trauma is being used, is being squeezed out for a purpose of furthering a Western career, or an outsider's career, whoever that may be. I think that also there's, at this current time, there's the privilege just really can't be overstated, because when you look at Burmese, whether you're talking about Burmese journalists or artists or academics or professors or whoever it is, if they put their name on their work, they could be in the direct line of fire, and their families could be in the direct line of fire. And the more attention that work gets, the more
Mm.
dangerous it is for them.
Mhm.
And yet, whether your career as a journalist, an artist, an academic, whatever, it is your name attached to that work that is going to give you those opportunities and make you a known entity. And so,
Mm.
there's this extraordinary unfairness of those Burmese professionals that are wanting to succeed at their field, and they have to decide either not to create, or to create something safe with their name on it, or to create how they want and then to remove their name, which gives them anonymity, or to go ahead the full direction and fearlessly, knowing the danger that puts them in. And we have to say, this is a danger that a
Mm.
lot of Westerners and outsiders, they're not facing the same way. And this is also the case where, as we're talking about trying, well, this is the sensitive nature and task ahead of us, because on one hand, we certainly want to gain an understanding of the conflict and of natural disasters. We want,
Mm.
just as there were comprehensive needs assessments, as far as they were able to be carried out after Nargis, those have to be taken place after the earthquake. And we're already
Mm.
hearing stories, and some of the people that we talk to, that these needs assessments are not being carried out. We're not knowing. There are large swaths of Sagaing, even as the regime is trying to relabel this the Mandalay earthquake to be able to take attention from
Mhm.
Sagaing. There are vast swaths of Sagaing where we don't know what happened. Those needs
That's
assessments
true.
need to be carried out. Analysis has to be done. And so there is this tricky relationship between wanting to do the work for the benefit of understanding, which can bring in the appropriate aid or international response, or impacting that narrative that we're talking about, while on the other hand realizing these are real people. And
Mm.
just as we in our past interviews, we might talk to someone who's reflecting on airstrikes or landmines or various other conflict that's going on, collapsed economy, displacement, etc., and we might be talking numbers and bird's eye view and the nature of the changing conflict. But we always have to go back and remind ourselves, these are real lives at stake. When we're talking about airstrikes, these are real
Yeah.
women, children, elders, entire populations that are being impacted daily by
Mm.
this absolute terror that's taking place. And to some degree, one has to separate. You can't do your job if you're feeling everything, if you're every every interview, every analysis, every photo that you're looking at, if whatever your field, if you're feeling everything while you do it, you can't do your job. And your
Yeah.
job is more important at times than your own personal feelings, because
Yeah.
you want to make that wider impact and get it out. So you do have to separate to some extent, but then you also have to come back, and you have to be in touch with your feelings, and you also have to be in touch with those that are supplying this information, and how you do have a privilege and to some degree of
Mm.
being able to walk away from it in ways they never will be. And yet their story does matter for whatever the impact it is you're trying to have. So these are all really tricky things to navigate, I think.
Totally. Like what I also realized right after the coup, like how difficult it is for Burmese people to be vocal, like against the military coup. I mean, even here in Germany, like you could say, like, oh yeah, they're in Germany, they are safe, they are not, because they're worrying about their friends and children, and they also don't know, do I go back or not? Do I have to go back at one point because I don't get asylum or whatever? So what I realized and frustrated me a lot is that the coup silencing them down, like it's. And then also, like in my personal experience after the coup, like people ask me, yeah, can you do an interview? Can you be vocal here? But I don't want to speak for others. Like, but after the coup, I have been in this situation a couple of times. I don't want to speak for Burmese people because I'm not Burmese. So, but then it's also very hard to find people who want to be vocal and critical against the military. And that's really, really challenging. And then additionally, I'm, yeah, sometimes like when like a newspaper asked me like, hey, can we do an interview with you? Like I'm always trying to ask, like, say like, yeah, you can do, but first please ask. Like I have one person I always ask because she's very vocal here in Germany, but she's also very busy. But I'm sometimes kind of tell the journalist like, here I have this contact or this contact, please talk to her because she's Burmese. But also like when it came to our interview, when you asked me, do you want to join the podcast? I was even questioning like, should I not? What's the matter? But yeah, then I was going through like all the podcast episodes and I was like, okay, no, it's very diverse. Like like you interview a lot of Burmese people. And so it's really about my perspective and not about Myanmar in general, or like asking what is the situation on the ground in Sagaing, because I don't really know. Yeah, but it's, yeah, challenging. Yeah, and I wanted to add something. Yeah, what you said, like in regard to these uncomfortable experience I had with the interview, like where I got questioned, like, why should we do this interview? And actually later on, I was also really like, that's super cool. They have the courage to say that. And it's really cool. They are so self-confident about like saying like, no, why should I face my trauma for your career? And then I was like, actually, I see a big change there, a positive change. That it's not like, oh, there comes a white Westerner or white nose. Sure, we do it. Because sometimes, like living in Myanmar, I felt a bit like sometimes like a princess, you know, like, I don't know, I was living in a very local neighborhood in Yangon, and always when I went to work, like, I don't know, everyone was so friendly, clapping, like giving me bananas and like serving me tea I was not able to pay for. And, you know, I felt a bit ashamed because I didn't want to have this extra treatment. And I also felt sure it was maybe out of a generosity, like, but yeah, I think it was because I was a Westerner, you know, and sometimes, yeah, I felt like, isn't it a bit humiliating? Or like they were kind of seeing me above them. And I don't want to be like above or prior to them. And actually, like seeing now this strengthening courage and being vocal saying, no, we see these hierarchies now. We reflect about these hierarchies. And no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, perfect. Actually, like I see a good change, even if it's a bit uncomfortable. But I think for a better change, there have to be more and more these uncomfortable situations to also find, yeah, a better future. Yeah.
That's really true. Yeah, yeah. I want to close by going back to what you started out this interview and talking about, and what the start of your Burma journey was, and that was this experience with monks and nuns. And I think if there's one part of the Burma experience that is really prone to misunderstanding and romanticization or Orientalist thinking, etc., it's the Buddhist element and imagining what a Buddhist monastery must be in Myanmar. And
Yeah.
I'm reflecting on this even as just to bring a bit of pop culture. And I just watched the third season of the HBO show The White Lotus, and which is a popular show here. And I think the first season was in Hawaii, the second was in Italy, and the third was in Thailand. And I think the show does do a really good job of bringing those kind of local elements to life and making you feel the surroundings. And I thought they did that in Thailand, with the exception of there was a plot line in this third season that was about a meditation center, a monastery, a Buddhist experience of the guests. And it was just atrocious, you know, for all of the years that I've spent in mainly Burmese, but also Thai monasteries and meditation centers. the way that this was portrayed, the physical environments, the monks, the teachings, the understanding of Dhamma and of Buddhism, it was a Western fever dream of an imagination of what one would like. It's all over the place. And there are so many pop culture references that we can bring in that really get Burmese and Southeast Asian Buddhism wrong in really appalling degrees. But the reason why I'm calling on this one is this is a show that has prided itself on such a level of authenticity and getting things right and making these kind of localities really come to life in authentic ways, that it just really stands out that this is one thing that they just have absolutely missed and fallen into that Western trap of seeing it the way that one wants to in its culture rather than the way it actually is. And so with that background and context, I want to prompt you to talk about, and perhaps you can start by sharing your understandings of Buddhism before you came, as it came to you in Germany, and then as you came part of this monastic caravan rolling through the country, and you were experiencing interacting with Burmese monks and nuns on an everyday basis, how that diverged from your conditioned understanding before then, and what real lessons you gained from that actual experience that you carry to this day.
Yeah, I had to laugh a lot because it's a really, really good question. Because before coming to Myanmar, I was not really religious, and I'm not, I would say, but back in the days, I was looking for a religion, kind of. So I was like, okay, yeah, Buddhism could be a really good religion to me, or like could give me guidance. And then, I mean, it was more accident that I end up or like visited this monastery, and I could stay there and traveling with the monks and nuns. But the real life was so different from what I was expecting. I mean, it started with like that so many monks had several cell phones. Like, I mean, I was like, ugh, like they had 3 cell phones. And I was like, what are you doing with these 3 cell phones? Or I remember also that every morning we had to wake up at 4 or 5 to meditate for an hour. And then everyone was sitting there meditating. And then there was a nun doing selfies, like playing some jingles on her iPad, and no one cared. No one cared. And I was like, yeah, but we are meditating. It's such a holy environment. You have to be quiet. But I was like, but actually then they said like, no, life happens. There are always distraction when you meditate. It doesn't matter.
Right.
You know? So I was like, yeah, interesting perspective. Like the concept I had about Buddhism and meditating was very different. And in Myanmar, I experienced a very practical approach, like also sometimes in a very funny way. I also remember like 2 years later, I visited another monastery, which was a bit more strict in meditating. And I also remember that during the meditation, like many nuns were farting all the time. I was like, why can't they just fart so much and not being ashamed? And I don't know, for me, it was very hard to meditate. Like there were no incense, like with the nice odor, like there were other odors by meditating. But they also said like, yeah, we are not ashamed of our body. Like it's with what do you identify with? And it's not the body. Like the body is not, it will be gone. Like beauty will be gone. Everything will be gone. Like everything changes all the time. And so why should I feel embarrassed for something my body does, which is not me? And yeah, I don't know. I was like, okay, this is such a different kind of approach in Buddhism than what we see here in Western world. And I mean, these were like moments where I was like, wow, that's really cool. This practical Buddhism is really cool. But there are also other experience I had, especially as a woman, where I was like, I think I can't like claim myself as a Buddhist ever, because it's also like a human-made concept, or I mean, sure, there is also some female influence, I guess, but it's also a bit hard tracing that back because it was hidden or not written down, like in what way nuns were, forming Buddhism. But it's a more or less male-made concept, and women are not seen equal to men. And I was like, okay, this is like a religious institution as well, and I don't find a home here. Like, I don't feel equal, and this is not where I feel home. Sure, like Buddhist teaching gives me a lot, but I think there are also some limitations. And then realizing that, I'm always end up like, okay, but I'm also a Westerner, maybe I don't understand it. It's like a bit of a dilemma. Also saying like, I can't criticize that because I don't maybe fully understand, or I mean, I haven't find a solution yet for that, but yeah, I don't know. I think when it comes to like basic, or for me, like human values and how I want to treat humans, it should be equal. And this is like my guidance, kind of like how I see things, or no matter like the cultural background. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot to hold, a lot of reflections there, and definitely something that needs to have a wider, deeper understanding than how it's come to the West in the past number of decades and even centuries. I'd like to close by asking you, because much of this conversation has centered around this concept of being an ally and what that role is, and many things that have to be balanced in one's being, and memories, experiences that have come from Myanmar at this time. I'd like to close by prompting you to share any kind of message or reflection that you'd like to leave on that topic, as we're still seeing the devastation that has been resulting, not just from the coup now, not just from the earthquake, but from the military's response to the earthquake, that, we all knew it was going to play out this way, and it's every bit as bad, if not worse, than what we're seeing. And here we are as allies in somewhat privileged positions, but in
Mm.
having roles to play, big or small, in terms of how we respond.
Mm. Yeah, being allies, I mean, it means so many different things. I mean, I think it's when you have Burmese people around you, just show empathy and solidarity in a deep percent, ask how they are, like on a very personal level, I guess. But yeah, also, I mean, especially now in this situation where it's such a devastating earthquake and many people are really in need, it is a financial thing. Like, it's important to donate because, I don't know, just resharing like I don't know, a picture from a destroyed monastery doesn't do anything to the people there. Like, sure, sometimes we're gonna caught up in these pictures and resharing. Sure, it's like bringing the message out to the world, but just, I don't know, we are privileged and we have more financial capacities and resources right now. And I think it's especially now important to give it to the grassroots organizations. And that people have enough water and just having the basic resources to start all over again. And somehow, I mean, how can they be self-reliant or like, how can they create their own structure we already have if they don't have water? Like, so I think it's especially important to donate. I mean, even little amounts. I mean, I don't know, 10 euro is so much more in Myanmar than here. And do you gonna miss this 10 euro in the end of the month? I think most of us, not so much. So even 10 euro make a little difference. Yeah. That's the last message I have. And maybe, listening to each other. Like, really, I find it so, I mean, it's so essential. It's so essential in so many ways. Not looking to Myanmar, just looking through to your surrounding and the people around you. And I think especially in these times, which are very challenging, and I guess many people feel insecure.
We're glad to have had you with us for this episode of Insight Myanmar podcast. You might know that beyond sharing stories and conversations on this platform, we also carry out humanitarian projects through our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. As we all know, the challenges these days are vast, but so too are the opportunities to provide meaningful support. Your contributions go towards supporting critical initiatives, such as providing food, medical supplies, and basic necessities to internally displaced persons in conflict zones. You can help to fund healthcare services that save lives and bring dignity to those in need. Your generosity also supports education efforts for children, helps mobile medical clinics, and provides care packages to political prisoners, just to name a few of the many programs we sponsor. You can support these impactful efforts and directly contribute to our projects, which uplift and empower those most affected by the crisis in Myanmar. Visit betterburma.org/donation to join in this effort.
Nangaya unyana dadu ya danam dia digane zat mana we gara besaya na besaya oba yarana da yarana ngana yarana ya da yarana boda ba yarana